there, folks. I sampled a Hammond organ. Now, before we get into this, I need to set some expectations straight. If you're expecting this, you may want to just keep scrolling, but I hope you don't, because this was a really fun project. The old beast that I sampled lives in the basement of my childhood home. It's been keeping my room warm for me ever since I moved out. It was given to me by a friend of my grandfather's who has spent a great deal of his life collecting Hammond organs. You should see the inside of this guy's house. This one clearly didn't make the cut for him, and fair enough. It's a Hammond Rhythm 2, or I guess maybe specifically it's one of the Hammond L models that has a Rhythm 2 unit in it. But either way, it's a pretty simple consumer model. It was probably just supposed to sit pretty in a late 1960s living room. Overall, sounds pretty cheesy, but it has a really specific charm to it, and I think that comes from its inconsistency. We can all just kind of admit that we like imperfection and inconsistency at this point, right? Like Bob Dylan's voice, or like jitter and old hand-drawn animation, the onslaught of all things lo-fi. This organ has all of that built in, and it's in large part due to its use of tone wheels. If you can imagine a bunch of little buzzsaw blades spinning inside the organ, then you've pretty much got the picture. All of these little metal wheels are cut in this jagged way to create controlled electromagnetic interference with a pickup. This is identical to the way that an electric guitar is able to produce sound. Instead of a string moving back and forth across the magnetic field over the pickup, we have strong and weak oscillations represented by the tooth and notch of the wheel. So it follows that if you want your notes to play steadily and in tune, then all of the moving parts on this organ have to be working flawlessly. Anybody who's ever used vintage outboard gear already knows this pain. A piece of hardware can just wake up on the wrong side of the bed. There were times that I would turn this organ on and there would just be a hiss and a roar for 10 minutes and then silence. If a wheel wobbles, that's pitch drift. If the spindles don't have the right amount of oil, then you're going to get notes that are maybe detuned for long periods of time until the wheel gets up to speed. And it doesn't help that not a single person in my household knew about or cared about the upkeep on an organ. That organ has undergone not 1 minute of maintenance since it was in my possession. Honestly, I think that just means that it's probably perfectly baked by now. So in keeping with the spirit of that, I started off by sampling probably one of my favorite quirks of these tone wheels. This spin-up effect is a secret weapon that I stumbled into years ago. I've used it in a bunch of Singer-Songwriter stuff that you're actually hearing in the background right now. I also employed it pretty liberally in a short little collection of ambient music that I recorded during a summer visit home to see my family. It was that album actually that spurred the idea that maybe I could capture some of these weird effects in a sample library.
Mr. Temple, it's simply thrilling.
It's a beautiful instrument.
So right here you can see the spins patch. I recorded major and minor chords, high unisons, and the pedals. You can build some truly rich stuff with just this patch. Certain polychords work really well, and the interplay between the recordings trembling in those first moments, it creates drones that just simply wouldn't hit the same if you held those chords on like a more standard patch. The knobs at the bottom here give even more control, allowing you to kind of hold those big drones and then adjust the mix in real time. Pro tip here, assign those to some MIDI CCs, and then you can kind of automate that as a piece progresses, put just tons of life and movement into the thing. Speaking of movement, we have vibrato switches here, which run as a common thread through all of the organ patches. The first two are sublimely cheesy vibratos that are built into the organ itself. The third is the infamous rotating Leslie speaker signal. Pop that on, and then you've got some shimmering stereo motion and a more honest-to-goodness organ sound. The next patch is again driven by that Ambient album that I mentioned. That album actually is just the Hammond organ. It may not sound like it. Because of the crazy signal chain that I used, each note had like a 2 millennia decay time, so I could kind of strike a couple of notes that would establish pedal tones, and then use my right hand to kind of embellish that. And then with my newly freed left hand, I would go over to the drawbars and just meddle with them.
By arranging the drawbars in different positions, we actually spell tones with harmonics like you spell words with letters.
When it came time to actually sample this concept, I wanted to leave it a little bit more naked so that people could add their own flavor of splash to it. So I substituted that signal chain out for my girlfriend, who graciously held down notes in perpetuity while I used my now 2 free hands to meddle even more with the drawbars. This was a sort of a Pandora's box moment for me, and I still feel like I only captured probably half of these little evolution performances that I wanted to, but I had like 2 evenings to do this, so I kind of had to cut my losses. So the least I could do was make the access to these evolutions as convenient and creative as possible.
It's possible to create quickly and easily thousands of beautiful, full, rich organ tones of your own choosing.
Really? How?
The GUI here is laid out with envelope controls up top, and then drawbar performance categories represented as the titles on the cassette. So Purity or Lumen or what have you represent a different strata of performance. And then of course you have this little box over here with a healthy list of presets. The cassette itself is toggleable, meaning that you can click right on it and you can see that a light flicks on. So you can switch between clean recordings and then those very same recordings after they had been sent through a cassette and tube pre. This list of presets is honestly really useful for quick inspiration, but I'm sort of hoping that they're almost like jumping off points for people, because making your own presets in this library is actually pretty swift and painless. The envelope controls being represented as knobs made perfect aesthetic sense to me. But there was a bit of a visual disconnect. Sometimes it's nice to see how the envelope is being changed in real time. And originally when I was scripting all of this by myself, I had kind of thrown in the white flag, figured that that was not going to be possible, at least not for my skill set. Thankfully, sample dev wizard Owen had been in touch with me about working on a sample library, and offered a bit of custom code that he had puzzled out, which allows for just the visualization that I had thought was a lost cause. I should be clear, Owen is the sort of extra spice on this library. All of these sounds were available in the initial build. They sounded the same. It was the same instrument. It was ready to be used, but it just wasn't ready to be used very cleanly. And when I'm writing, I'm not a huge fan of having to flip between different patches, searching for the one that I had used or the one that I had kept in mind earlier, and now I have to reload a new instance. That's not the right one. Just like, you either don't have time for that or you don't want to spend that time away from the creative process. So all of these quality of life improvements, presets, envelope visualization, toggleable performance types, and that's all thanks to Owen hearing my complaints about how I couldn't hack it very cleanly and just kind of f***ing doing it. You know, like, I can't thank you enough, Owen. This library is way more fun to use now. Now, if you're worried that I stared down the barrel of something named the Rhythm 2 and then just ignored that part of it, then worry not. I have 2 more patches that aren't right now on Piano Book that I think I might talk about once those are available, wherever they're available. One, of course, being the drum machine. Just as a quick overview, all of these patterns are tempo synced. I've also included versions of each groove that have been processed through that same cassette tube pre-chain. And I've also got a sort of standard and completely playable version of the organ that uses some of the drawbar presets and has the pedals mapped as well. So I hope to be doing some kind of video in the future demoing that, maybe just writing a piece or maybe talking just at short length about them. For now though, go and grab the tone wheel memories, which are available for free right now on Piano Book. All the links are going to be in the description. Go out and make some vibes with this thing.
An organ that many people, old and young, can enjoy.